Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Today marks the 25th anniversary of wrestling coach John Du Pont being convicted of murdering Olympic champion Dave Schultz at his Foxcatcher Farm in Pennsylvania. I spoke with director Bennett Miller, who chronicled the chilling story in the 2014 film Foxcatcher, starring Steve Carell, Mark Ruffalo, and Channing Tatum. Bodie, Moneyball, this. You seem to love these true life tales. Or is it just coincidence?
Well, I think it's in part coincidence, but I also just like having something that I could actually, examine. Something that's real, that you can scrutinize and can yield real, insight if you stare at it hard enough. I began developing this one from scratch. It just began with seeing some newspaper articles about it, and so. And there wasn't a lot of information available, so there's no book or article or anything. There's no great source material to begin with.
It's not a straight adaptation or something.
No, like those other things. But where there's just so much available at your fingertips. But there's something about the story that just drew me into researching it and learning about it. But the challenge comes more with conceiving of the story in such a way that it adds up to more than just the story. Right. Each of these films, to me, resonated with significant themes, and they have an allegorical quality, for me at least, and they actually operate in the same way fiction operates, meaning it's always, for me, good fiction is always about something bigger than the story.
Right, on multiple levels, yeah.
Yeah, so if it's not doing that, then it's just sensationalism. You could look at a story like this and go, eccentric millionaire, wealthiest man ever convicted of murder, and wrestlers, and it's really not that hard to find a film in that. What was hard is to keep asking questions and to look past the spectacular and dig down into some deeper currents and find something that was more relevant and resonant. Mark Schultz left the farm right after the '88 Olympics. Right. And then the murder didn't happen for 8 years after that.
Like in the mid-'90s?
Yeah, 96. And I collapsed that time for dramatic expediency. It was set in the 80s, and it was set in Reagan. Yeah. It was a new morning in America, and there was an idealism, I think, that people were latching on to. That was a reaction to a bleaker reality that many were feeling. Yeah. The first act, which is set in Wisconsin with these brothers who are Olympic champions but hardly scraping by, was sort of a Carter-era reality.
Right. Yeah, true.
And, he's sort of airlifted into this idealism.
And he's ready to buy into that. He wants to believe it.
He wants it, yeah. So it just, part of what made the story appealing is that you didn't have to reach for that stuff. It was all right there. And it's just natural metaphor.
Obviously another huge theme is between the brothers. Do you have a brother yourself? Is there something you pull from that?
I do have two brothers, but this is not really based on my relationships with my brothers.
For sure, yeah. In casting those two brothers, because it's a huge, that's the huge driving, thing behind most of the movie. Which one did you cast first? Was it Channing or Ruffalo? And how did that affect the casting of the other one?
Well, I offered the role to Channing 8 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was in a movie called Guide to Recognizing Your Saints. Mm-hmm. It's the first time I'd ever seen him, first time I'd ever heard of him. Saw the film, didn't even have a script yet. Called him up, met with him, pitched him the movie, offered him the part.
So that one performance was enough that you said,
and meeting him. Yeah. There was nothing else to look at. Like, Step Up hadn't come out yet.
Right.
There was nothing else there, but I just thought, you know what, it's nice to cast an obscure actor in this role and not to have a big movie star. Of course,
he is.
6 years to get made, and that was a biggest movie star on the planet Earth.
But you saw the potential before that, though. So.
Yeah, I mean, that role is amazing in Guide to Recognizing Your Saints, and in the direction his career took and the sorts of roles that he would get really were in a different direction. And this is sort of going back to something closer to how he began. But the role of Dave Schultz, Mark Schultz's brother, it's hard to say how the casting of Channing affected that decision, because I really didn't have a number two. There was really only ever one person in my mind to play that role.
Oh, nice.
It was just,
nice when it works out.
It was going to be Mark Ruffalo. So they complement each other so well. Mark, lost his brother. Mark Ruffalo lost his brother. And he had a very similar relationship.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he had a very similar relationship with his brother as he has in this film.
When you're on set, do you tap into that, or is it you just know he already is coming from that? I mean, that's a touchy thing for sure.
He shared the relevance to me well before we ever began shooting.
Sure.
We really had one real talk about it, and it was more him just sharing with me than a conversation. And we never talked about it again. But I got to know Mark very well, and I knew when things when stuff was bubbling up.
Sure. Well, I think it shows through for sure in his performance. How about Steve? I mean, he's getting all kinds of notoriety and people saying, the comic actor, look at him playing this role. But
right.
you saw it in him before. What is it, Little Miss Sunshine? He had a more serious role, suicidal role. I mean, the way back last year, he was kind of the jerk father. What did you see in Steve beneath the comedic surface that so many other people see that said he can play this role? He's the guy for this.
Well, just that, really. That beneath the comedic surface is another side to him that really does not get aired out too much. There's a public persona that we're all familiar with, and there's a private reality. To be such a public persona as Steve Carell, for your own sanity, I think you have to maintain a good measure of privacy. And it's none of the world of business, how complicated you might be behind the comedic mask.
Right.
But when we discussed this role, he expressed a pretty deep understanding of the character and what this film was and what it would take, and as well as a willingness to exhibit some of these qualities.
Sure.
And other than being an extremely talented actor, that kind of commitment, it goes a long way when casting somebody.
And do you take pride in the fact there's all this early award buzz for him, and maybe for some of the other actors too? I mean, you directed God Rest His Soul, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and Capote. You got Brad and Jonah Hill and Moneyball. I mean, do you take pride in the fact that from the outside people can look in and say, hey, this guy's kind of an actor's director?
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's sort of, it's a detail. It's a detail. I mean, I'm not in it to just get good performances. I'm in it for the big picture.
Right. But what is it about you working with the actors that seems to resonate? If there is some young director wondering, how do I work with actors? What's your secret?
I care. That's all. That's the main thing, is just caring, being, having a determination to find a process, because it's different in every film with all the different actors and different ensembles. Finding a process that is going to allow these actors to be truthful.
Your directing eye, there's a lot of voyeuristic shots kind of lurking behind the trees or lurking with a stuffed fox in the foreground, How do you use that to kind of build the dread, especially in a tale where, if you look up the real story, what happens in terms of the murder, but how do you use, the lens, the eye, the cinematic eye to kind of build that dread with those voyeuristic type lurking shots?
It's what you just said. The film doesn't tell the story, it observes it, and the way it's lensed is voyeuristic. You're right. And the lens choices and the deliberateness with which the camera moves or does not move, as well as the sound, design.
Silence too.
The silence and, and how all of the different elements work to sensitize you to noticing what the characters themselves aren't even noticing, which is a voyeuristic quality. It's like we are seeing something that we're not supposed to be seeing, and maybe something no one else sees. The whole style of the film is rooted in that ambition.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.